Is it on? Oh, it is on.
It isn't.
There you go. I can't even reach the water from here.
You're never going to reach that water.
I know.
Afternoon, guys. So just introduction from me. I think I recognise some people in the room, but my name's Simon McDonald. I'm the VP and General Manager for Optimizely APJ. So I'll be hosting the panel today, so most of the questions will be going to these two. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, I'm Matt, Group General Manager of Customer and Digital at Country Road Group.
Neymar, formerly New Republic, moved on to Deloitte Digital and now running a small consulting firm called White Maven.
Awesome. So I think when we're discussing what we're going to do for this panel today, we were trying to do something a little bit different, which came to the point where we're going to get questions from the audience to ask directly, rather than going through what we feel is a fairly similar theme in terms of like building cultures of experimentation. So I guess we've had a couple of questions come through from you guys, so just keep them coming through the sessions. But I just wanted to, I guess, get your guys' point of view on something that I think a lot about. And like, as a business who really focus on experimentation as part of a digital strategy, I still think in Australia it's very underutilized. And I look at experimentation and think that this should be a 101 business practice for every single organization that's got any sort of digital footprint. So Matt, as an executive at the Country Road Group, I just wanted to understand that, is the progression or the growth of experimentation, do you think that's anything to do with the nervousness that executives have, that their experience is no longer as important because we're making data-driven decisions? I just wanted to get your view on what you thought that might be like in general.
As in, why are they gun shy about these kind of things, or
well, why is
not leaning in the way they should?
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's a question of probably two things in the current circumstance. One is just the environment, like pretty tough economy out there, and I think in really tough times, people fall back on what they know and what is safe and what is tried and true. But I think it's also experience, right? Like if you've been in a business that is really firing, where that is the engine of what really drives the growth and the incrementality, you have just a very different mindset around what the role could be. But actually, if you're honest, like it's only certain businesses within this country who think that way about this kind of topic. And so it's kind of then becomes a bit of a question of like, have you had international experience where there's a very different philosophy on these kind of things, I'd say, or have you been in one of those businesses locally that have actually seen it and really been converted to the value of it all?
Yeah, and then I suppose, I guess people who aren't aware of your background, coming from like brands like Uber and Iconic to then coming into CRG, you're seeing that different approach? Very different,
yeah. And that's the thing, like a sort of, yes, there was a huge amount of experimentation that drove forward the Iconic, as you would imagine, as a pure play digital first business. But the eye-opening experience was really just at Uber, where like there was a mind-boggling number of experiments that were being run at any particular time, which was just so energizing. And I think sort of once you see it at scale as well, and you realize how quickly you can hit that insight and get that directional confidence in terms of whether something's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just becomes such an absolute weapon of a strategic advantage over other businesses. So.
Yeah. I'd imagine most of you know Nima because he's a pretty big deal around here, but for those who don't, I think his partner and Nima really have been in the space for over 10 years, so have really helped cultivate CRO, experimentation, etc. within Australia. Are we
recording this? Because he never says nice things about me. Can I get a replay after this?
But I guess based on that sentiment as well, like 10 years, we've created a bit of a movement, or have we? Like, do you think experimentation is where it should be at in Australia right now?
No. I think you got to recognise, like, Optimizely did a lot to build this category in Australia. You went from flying in every quarter to setting up an office, and that trajectory that Optimizely's driven has definitely helped. I think the biggest trouble is I still can't see executives falling in love with incremental gains. They're still looking for silver bullets. They're looking for this, I spend $1 million here and I'm going to get 7 million back. The idea of 1% incremental gains just has not landed, that if you accumulate that over a year, and I think that's the greatest challenge, is unfortunately, this space is still like a teenager sex life. Everyone talks about it, no one's doing it. And I'd love to change that vernacular, because it is such a powerful thing when done right. That was one of those
That's
things.
a new
Please
one,
leave it as
right?
it's a new one, write that down. But I just feel like everyone's on the precipice, and there's so many more people talking about it, but there's just not enough execution and investment from the executives, and I think people still don't know the right way to communicate it back to the execs. There's very few Matts in the world who have come from cultures like that and then go into a traditional one and try to change it. It's still challenging. I don't think anyone's cracked it yet.
Yeah. Can I just in terms of a show of hands for people in the audience, as an organisation, are you guys running experimentation programs currently?
If you're from Optimizely, you can't put your hand up.
Yeah. So it's like a 50-50 split, right? Which I still find confusing, because if the other thing, if we look at like global brands, the programs that are running, and these global brands are putting footprints on the ground in Australia, like H&M, Zara, like there's armies of people that are doing testing for these organizations, and it is going to hit the Australian shores quickly, and then we can't do anything about it. I mean, do you think there's an awareness of that at like an executive level of what these bigger brands are doing, and we need to be doing more of that in Australia to combat that? Because brand loyalty as a thing is kind of disappeared a long time ago. Do you think like executives are aware of that in terms of what's happening overseas and the pressure that's going to be on this market?
I'd say two things, maybe. One, to build on what you were saying, and then to answer the question more directly. One, I think part of the problem is that I'd say like a lot of corporate Australia actually just lacks vision, where they are so used to thinking about things that they can touch and feel as key assets that they can then leverage strategically.
Like retail space.
Retail space, stores, whatever that might be, new
yeah.
machinery, new distribution centre. You can touch it, you can feel it. It's sort of, it feels more tangible. But actually, as credit to those businesses who are jumping on the retail media train. Actually, when you think about it properly in this day and age, particularly with business of scale, actually your biggest asset isn't any of those things. It's actually like, 1.5 million Australians hit our sites every single week, or 500,000 walk through our physical doors. I'm like, it's the intangible assets that are actually valuable, much, much more valuable than anything that people traditionally think about. And I think that's a real barrier.
Can I, before you go,
Yeah.
How did you get Raju? Like Raju is the CEO, group CEO. How did you get him to flip the script into experimentation? Because you've taken a guy who's quite traditional in his thinking, and he's kind of evolved a lot. What did you do?
Half my team's here and this is being recorded, but
Ex-nay on the Raju day.
it's speaking the language of value. We measure. We're now at a point with our team where we measure everything we do actually, and every 6 months we actually present back to the exec team around here's the sum of the parts of all the program, and
Do you
here's
say
how much.
this is the test we did, or do you go?
We
here's the
roll it
result?
up. Sometimes we tease out the really interesting ones to prove a
Yeah.
point, because sometimes some of the simplest of things can actually be the most effective. But we speak about the roll up of the program as a whole. But then we take those steps to meet your audience where you find them, as it were, speak their language, and so we translate everything into the language of IRR and blah blah blah. But to your point as well, I think I think a lot of corporate Australia is thinking about things the wrong way from a strategic perspective. And then B, I think they're just being naive about the fact that it's 2024 and what that actually means.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is, or sort of my point of view on this, is that actually it's no longer really a choice or a cute thing that you can do, this kind of stuff, because actually you see these giant, very traditional companies investing in this pretty heavily. And they're doing it at scale, they're doing it in markets where they can get that insight and that confirmation of whether something's a good idea or a bad idea really fucking fast, because they're doing it in New York or London or wherever it might be across all of Europe. And I think that sort of, Inditex is a really interesting example that unexpectedly perhaps, not necessarily a digitally leading player, but a couple of things come to mind. They've been in market with a bunch of apps for a long time. We've followed a similar sort of strategy. There was a point in time where I would look at those apps and think, these are shit. The CX and the UX is just absolutely terrible, and this is a textbook what not to do. You look at them now, and actually the apps are getting pretty good. And what that is being driven by is actually they're really investing this in the background, right? And then the other challenge is that just becomes, Australia's just the tail end of a long rollout schedule. But secondly, that's happening across all things when it comes to digital as well. The other thing that Inditex I think is doing well is to think that from trialling a new concept flagship store in central Paris, which is fully digitally enabled, to rolling it out in the suburbs of Melbourne was a 13-month lead time, is just kind of,
Yeah, well.
I think we're in a a slowly warming bath with these kind of factors. And I think this old notion that's like, oh, well, that's America or that's Europe, it won't come here. It's like, no, actually, these are people who are going to look to fully leverage the insights and the data and the technology investments they're making. So of course, I'll roll it out here eventually. So it's how do you respond to that before it gets too hot?
Yeah, so there's been a couple of similar questions come through about speaking to executives and getting buy-in from a program. So, Nima, you've run like multiple programs across different verticals, like outside of just retail. Like, how do you talk to people who are trying to get investment in a program? How do you help them talk to executives? Because you're talking about they're not seeing the 1% incremental growths. There's reason to invest. Like, what are the key things that you help organizations design and talk to executive buyers?
I think the biggest problem with experimentation is experimentation. I think what we talk,
quote unquote from Nima, you can take that away.
It is like, I mean, the bad thing is we create this rod for our back where we say, you know, you will get an uplift of, you know, 180% or 1,000% uplifts. Remember those a few years ago, and so an executive goes, all right, let's do this, and they don't get that buy-in. And the biggest problem is, I think, we get a program in place, and we're so focused on running tests that we forget to bring other people on the journey. We forget that culture side, because you're now telling people, I'll tell you something now, if you think you can have an experimentation program and have BAU, you're kidding yourself. BAU will trump experiments any fucking day, because organizations are built around ship it mentality. Build it, ship it, move on to the next thing. Who gives a shit if it works or not, right? On the grand total, if we ship enough stuff, something's going to work out. And I think that's the problem, because you're fundamentally changing the way you work, which means if you don't bring people... I remember one conversation I had recently talking about we need to bring the organization on culture, you know, understand the political side of experimentation. And they said, the CEO's bought in. It's the product team and the CTO that isn't. And I was like, that's the culture bit you need to solve. It isn't always the leadership team. It's sometimes the people on the sides that need to come on the journey, and I don't think anybody does a good job in not focusing on tests, but focusing on educating, getting people involved, re-looking at the way structures work, and running experiments. And the agencies, of which I am one, are very guilty of that, because we're trying to prove we're value. You know, you should keep us, don't get rid of us after POC. So we're focused on delivering results, rather than actually stepping back and going, let's get your culture in place first. Then let's go build some results.
Culture and KPI, I'd say, as well. So like a big KPI across all of my team is incremental value add. And so we just sort of, part of the bargain, the way we got confidence is like, have faith in us after we sort of built a bit of momentum around the program and what we're doing. And then we turned around and said, actually, like, we're going to hold ourselves to account to, you know, create $20 million in incremental value.
Yeah. And
if we don't do it, let's zero base the budgeting next year and think about how we do things differently, but set those right incentives. And that, I think, also gives like CFOs and CEOs confidence. Just like, well, you know,
that's what we did. There. Big airline, same thing. We actually delivered $11 million of revenue. They went, that works. But the first 3 months, we didn't run tests. It was all like, who are the teams? Who are the people that need to learn about this? What are your fears? You're not going to be made redundant. You're actually going to be made more valuable. And as soon as they start to realize that, they come on the journey with you. So the first 3 months was just getting people not to think this will fire people or change things. It's more a kind of a restructure of how we're looking at stuff. I think we missed that bit.
Yeah, and there's probably a few questions that have come through about how do you start a program and stuff like that as well. So doing the boring stuff first is also a good idea. So laying the foundations, laying the structure, the governance part of building a program, but then leaning into getting the exec buy-in is probably the second part of that, right? Where you're building the foundation so you can then run as quickly as you want to run, which leads us into the next question, like velocity over quality. Like, where does that sit for both of you guys? Like, do you want to get your guys running as many tests as they can to build test, fail fast mentality? Or do you want them to think about the quality of the tests that they're building? Because velocity used to be a metric that everyone really gave a shit about. I think less so now. Like, what's your school of thought on that?
Oh, we might have different opinions on this, actually. We're not talking about this.
Go.
I think velocity any day of the week.
Yeah,
really?
If I'm perfectly honest. Yeah.
Let the battle begin.
No, but I think about like the secret sauce of like great startups and whatnot. And like one is actually just a ruthless focus on acquisition and growth. And then the second is once you've caught them, how do you experiment at such a high velocity that you're really landing the things that are, you work out what works and what doesn't really fucking quickly. Like I actually think one of the most important things for a successful business is momentum. Like
Right.
the worst thing you can do is stand still for too long. And I think even in a microcosm, sometimes I take that philosophy and it was like, let's just go, actually. I sort of like, I get nervous about, I understand it philosophically where you're coming from, but I get nervous about anything that involves slowing down. Because I think that sort of then potentially has like broader cultural and enterprise issues where it's like, oh, we're going to did a good job getting that one right. Let's take ourselves, just a notch down again to get the next one really, really right. And I'm like, how quickly does that end in a world where you're pumping out an experiment when you could have done 10?
So, but it sounds like your mentality comes from working at somewhere like Uber, Iconic, where you're told to run as fast as you can, and then learn from that, move on to the next thing, create velocity, like almost running a startup within a more traditional organization.
Yeah, completely.
Which sounds different to the way you look at things. Nima.
No, I don't. I want to say I don't totally disagree. I'm now going to backflip.
Okay.
No, I don't disagree. The only thing I would say is at the start, a lot of time people run tests, but they don't know what to test, so they just test everything, and that's just as dangerous as not moving. So I think it's a bit of a, before you run, you need to find stuff that has impact, because you're buying, getting people to come on board to see that this thing can work. I think speed is only great when people believe that this shit really works. Because if you do a whole bunch of tests, you get no results, no real learnings because you've run it improperly, then people just go, what's the point of doing this? I think at the start of any program, it's all about quality over quantity, and then once you get to understanding how to run a program, how to find the right test, value size it, and those things become fast, because as you do something in a habit, you get better at it and you just do it faster, then it's about velocity. So I think it's about timing rather than one or the other, but at the start of a program, I would always pick quality over quantity. The other side is anyone from eBay here? Excellent, let's talk about it. So eBay has this thought, which I don't know if it's a good idea, but they say there's no point us productionizing anything because we're just going to retest on it. And they don't even wait to get to stat sig. They get to 60% and just go, send it to 100%, let's do the next experiment. Their mentality is like what you're saying is just keep fucking moving, and through the sheer mass of the experiments we run. So if you're eBay and you've got a shit ton of traffic and your mentality is I'm just going to keep testing on top of what I'm testing, keep going for speed. But if you're trying to get people to come on the journey, just make sure the first things you do deliver some kind of impact that you can go, this stuff works, now let's get together and actually talk about how do we drive it at speed.
That resonates. I think in early programs you
That was my political answer. Did you like it? I like that.
You've done better. Anchoring in nascent programs at the lower funnel, I think, is really important. Like, I think it's sort of some of the more interesting examples are like how do you shift things like add to cart and wish listing and stuff like that. But I think in the early days, you just got to show that you can bring in the money.
100%.
Which is sort of, it's
you got to prove it,
it's
right?
one-dimensional and it's not the full richness of it all. But if you start there,
Yeah, so, because most people in this room are probably not going to have the traffic that eBay does.
No.
And there's been questions around how do you start a program, so it's make sure that you show value and then you can start adapting that more run fast approach.
There's this, I don't know if you guys, there's this thought piece that I had around, there's 3 peaks you'll go through in a program. First the political, then your operational, then your democratization. Don't start a program thinking you're in the operational peak where you're just trying to run heaps of experiments. You're in the political peak. Your job is to get other people to be impressed in what you're doing. So the hippo that you get told not to listen to, fucking listen to them because they got money. Their name's Matt. And if you can prove that it works, they had more money. Not that you're a hippo, you're a good looking hippo.
No, because so our global
they
CEO,
say romance is dead now.
our global CEO is in town, and he talks a lot about the hippo concept, but he also describes what the hippo looks like.
Yeah, that's a cool saying.
With big mouth and little ears, so they speak too much.
That's not what we're saying.
So from being a potential hippo, like how do people in your organization get you on side to really be more vested in the experimentation program?
Get me on side?
Yeah, like get you more invested, or like want to do more. What do they come to you and talk about?
It's just not a conversation. Like my only pushback is I think sort of we have our CRO programs in the room as well. In that kind of space, like I think we've got good maturity. I actually don't need to talk to them, to be perfectly honest. I've got bigger fish to fry. I've got great talent in that space, a mature program. If anything, we just need to sort of work out how we can scale it, get more resources in there. For me, it's a conversation in new areas of the business. We're experimenting in other spaces like CRM and all that kind of stuff. And for me, it's just the only thing I want to hear is velocity.
How do you manage scale? like you've got a finite budget, you've got reason. What do you do from a scaling perspective? Because I know a lot of people face that. It's like, how do I scale this thing?
The program or?
Yeah, both from a people person, like do you offshore, in-source? Like how do you scale a program when you get to that point of like, hey, this is really delivering value?
Yeah.
How do I drive and scale it? Do you take from another area to scale that, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, good question. I think we're probably from a technological perspective only just at the precipice of the world
Yeah.
where we now need to work out how
But
to
in like the
scale.
Ubers in the world, like what would they do?
Well, they take a very ruthless view around sort of what are the capabilities we need to win,
Yeah.
and where are we going to grandfather capability
And do they
out.
cut? Oh, they grandfather
Yeah, absolutely.
something.
Yeah.
Got it.
I mean, sort of at some level, it's zero basing as a concept taken to a real extreme, which is like
Yeah.
there will be decisions that are made in SF around we will just not backfill in this space to create the organisational headroom
Put it
to
around.
invest into
Yeah,
this
right.
space. And I think that's the challenge in this space, right? Because actually, if I think about my portfolio, not just because I sit in the role that I sit in, like everything we do has value. But in all honesty, like we drive 66 to 68% of the group EBIT, and we're a multi-billion-dollar business. Our challenge is how do you then influence other people at the executive table to be saying, actually, no, I don't need 40,000 planners in my business anymore. It's 2024. We should start running this down so we can beef up capability and.
So your challenge is getting them to shift resources back into what you need.
Correct, because I think sort of
Yeah,
if it's
right.
just a conversation within my vertical, it's kind of like Sophie's choice, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like both things are good things that you should be doing
Yeah,
strategically. There's a bigger enterprise conversation.
It's a
that needs to
budget
happen.
conversation. Stop spending there, let's start
It's a
spending
strategy conversation first and foremost,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
does it actually
here. And then
translate
has
to
a
the
trend.
budget?
Yeah. That's interesting.
There's a bit of a theme coming through around like prioritization.
Uh-huh.
Like how do you see, or what is the best way of looking at prioritizing the experiments that you're going to be running? I guess from across multiple businesses, like is there frameworks that you think about, or is it
That we
revenue?
use?
Yeah.
So there's two, I mean, everyone uses their prioritization, like the PI method and so forth. There's a couple of things that we do. So prioritization isn't one thing. So there's grouping experiments into your thematics. What are the themes that we're running? Then looking at value versus impact. You know, if I spend 10 hours here, what kind of impact do I get? And then there's the nitty-gritty stuff around how to prioritize what you run first, second, third. If you use any of the US models, like your PIs of the world, they just don't work in Australia because they don't take into account statistical significance, audience levels, and they don't look at dramatic amount of change required to be able to drive those things. If you use product models like Rice, they're good, but again, they don't think about statistical significance. We built our own, but that's in the nitty-gritty. I'll share it with you guys later if you want it, just come and grab it. But there isn't one thing, it's a group of things that you do. And then one thing I would say is, once you prioritize, you don't stop, because every time you run an experiment, an insight will drive the next experiment you want to do. So those tests, it's an evergreen process, and business priorities change, so you got to relook at your prioritization and reprioritize. So it's a number of things. It isn't one thing that you do to prioritize.
And what does that look like for you at CRG, Matt?
Similar story, I guess, in terms of how we sort of think about it. But I think for like at an executive level, I think it's as simple as doing two things: setting the right KPIs and hiring the right people. We've got a great team in place. Again, we're measured on, or the measurement that I set them and that I'm accountable to Raju, our CEO, on is incremental value add. Let them work it out. Like hire bright people and let them work out what the
That's a
best answer
GM
is.
response right there.
So vague.
That's good.
Okay, so we've got questions. So in terms of experimentation versus personalization, what is more important?
You go on this one. It's all you. Time's ticking.
I would say experimentation. Yeah.
We got a recording.
Yeah. I think sort of like solve for the masses before you get too tricky around solving for
I'm with Matt.
cohorts and individuals. I think people get lost in the like, wow, isn't
100%
this
dude.
great? It's like, yeah, but the baseline of your experience is shit. And my guys would have heard me say this before, which is like, I think it's something really powerful in the fact that someone, big enough, bad enough, or sophisticated enough as Amazon still obsesses over the basics.
Totally.
First and foremost, it's at the core of their DNA as an
20
e-commerce
years in
organisation.
as well. That's, yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and like how many trillions in turnover. I think that's really powerful. They're still stretching into the fancy personalisation stuff, but I think there's a reason as to why Amazon is Amazon. I think they've made that choice.
Yeah, my thought is personalization is really easy to sell. Experimentation's hard. Like go and explain to statistical significance or, false positive to any executive, they'll just fall asleep. Whereas, hey, if you're a QSR, maybe you shouldn't show, meat dishes to a vegetarian. That probably just won't work for you. So it's really easy to sell. But the way I see it is personalization is all about content and context, right message, right person, right time. Experimentation is all about the flow and the function of the experience. Yeah. If you haven't got the flow right and you haven't got the function of the experience right, you can put more users into a funnel. They'll just leave. You're just exacerbating a problem and you think that personalization is going to solve it. It isn't. And the other problem with personalization is it works on micro, because you bring audiences down to this small group and then you try to do an A/B test inside that. You don't reach stat sig, you don't get any real results, and you've spent millions of dollars, and you're basically standing there with your thing in your hand, wondering what the hell did I do wrong in life? Anybody out there feeling this?
Pause and then
just let that soak in. Let that soak in.
So I guess like if we think about experimentation just as a practice, there's like different models, centralized, decentralized. Matt, there's obviously a number of brands. What's that setup like for CRG? And then Nima, I'll probably get a view from you on what you think the better.
I'd want to not answer that, and I want to ask you that question, because that's a really good one. You're out there selling experimentation, yep. You've got personalization. What's the challenge for you? Which one do you sell?
So if we look at, well, we don't sell either. It depends on the way.
You get what I'm trying to ask. Like the same question back to you. Like, what do you found? Because you're talking to so many people.
Well, we typically see that building out a centralized model is the way to start.
Yeah. But personalization first or experimentation?
For experimentation, for people talk about personalization.
Yeah.
Different meaning to everyone.
Yeah.
I think experimentation is more complex
yeah.
to talk about, but conceptually, building out a team. Experimentation and personalization should be a marriage.
But is that expected for Optimizely? Walk in the room and talk about it?
But this is the misconception that Optimizely does both.
Yeah.
So our product delivers both, and we think about personalization as a part of experimentation.
Yeah, right.
So that's the way that everyone should think about it, because you're never going to create a personalized experience that is right for someone unless you've got data to back that up. Just because you think one thing works for another doesn't, essentially work for a different category or a
yeah.
different brand or whatever. So
yeah.
we think about them both together. We think about teams building out a centralized model, because until you get that skill set, you then can't push that across the business. But what we're seeing a lot of, like what I really like seeing at the moment is, and we ran a session, Optus was one of the speakers last week, where they talked about building a behavioral economics academy, which they actually encourage people to come in and give them ideas. And they've now created this really diverse way of making decisions in their business. Yeah, right. So you've almost got this centralized model where they're inviting people to come in and actually give them ideas, which is almost creating a decentralized model with a bit of control. So we're seeing this really nice halfway house at the moment, because a decentralized model is often with larger organizations. But then the other part of it is from an employee experience. We're seeing organizations give decision making to people perhaps they wouldn't before, because they're putting in guardrails that experimentation technology allows. So you think about the speed organizations can make decisions, the way they're democratizing decision making through experimentation.
Yeah.
We're seeing executives buy into that a lot now, because one of the top priorities they've got is staff retention. So employee experience comes as part of that.
I think your music's coming on, you're getting the wind up. Grab your logie, get off the stage.
I know it's very hard to make you two stop talking.
Oh, we can stop now?
You've only got 27 seconds.
We can stop there.
Can I ask one more? Do you ever say no to someone? Do you go, no, you're not ready for personalization, you've got to do experimentation? Have you ever...
Do you want my sales hat on or off?
No, honestly, do you ever walk in, because I know you're selling a SaaS product, but fundamentally you're building a category. You've got a responsibility to that category. So do you ever walk in and go, you're just not ready for this? I know you think you are, but you're not.
So, it's like everything. The level of personalization you can get to depends on the data that you've got as an organization. And it also depends on the maturity of your customer base. Some consumer bases aren't ready for personalization, and they don't want it.
Yeah.
And as a brand, you need to be able to recognize that. And also then it's what is the definition of personalization? Is it just geography based?
Yeah.
Still personalizing there.
Yeah.
I think in Australia, when we asked all of our panelists at our events last week, what they're most excited about, they're all like personalization. I was like, Jesus Christ, I heard that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think still in Australia, there's just a level of maturity on both experimentation and personalization, which I'm still excited to see what's coming, because I don't feel like we're not even scratching the surface.
Yeah.
So we absolutely say no to people that are not ready, because they then won't get the full value of what we're doing.
There's no point selling the tech.
Well, there's not. There's really not. So
Yeah,
you
that
need
makes
people
sense.
to have a positive experience.
Thanks for joining our conversation. I think there's people.
It's been an absolute pleasure. If you guys have got any questions, please feel free to come up and make Nima feel as uncomfortable as possible.
It's impossible.
Matt, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, thanks guys for coming along.